Okay,
Okay.
now we're set.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. This is amazing. I think we have 150 people. I don't know, Lee, if it's gone up, but we have rabbis and cantors and lay leaders and rabbinic students and other Reform Jews from all over California. I think this is by far our biggest webinar. And it's a great time for it. So my job is just to say what we're going to do tonight. We're going to recap the Tikkun Tikva campaign, what we did with our allies to pass Prop 57 and take a real step in reforming the prison system. And that was important. We're going to update ourselves on the situation now, both nationally and in California. And we're going to talk about our strategy for this moment, what we can do together. And we will, I think, go away tonight with things that we can do specifically, locally, in our communities and in our congregations. So have your questions ready for our panelists who are going to be focused on that, on our next steps, statewide and locally. And I'll just say, I think I'm not alone in feeling really grateful that I have people to do something with, in addition to signing all kinds of things and talking to people and processing and all that, that we're doing something that has to do with getting prepared and taking advantage of the ways that our new situation, both in terms of what we've just done and in terms of the new national political landscape, taking advantage of the aspects that actually give us new opportunities because people are coming awake politically in new ways. And that is really exciting. So thanks for the chance to welcome people and to be here together with everyone tonight, virtually. I'll stop there.
Great, Lori.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So happy to be here with you tonight. I'm Lori Stein. I'm the immediate past president of Leo Beck Temple in Los Angeles. I've been involved with the work of Reform California since its inception. And I just wanted to run through quickly Tikkun Tikva and all that we accomplished together. Tikkun Tikva, as you see, was our tagline for restoring hope, reforming sentencing, and engaging voters. It's built on the success of 3 past campaigns. The first was passing and asking the governor to sign the Trust Act, which gave immigrants rights and protections. The second was asking the governor to sign a bill that would allow us to collect data, or police to collect data on police stops. That was a hard one to pass because the governor had been pressured by sheriffs and other law enforcement officials to not sign. And the third one was we lobbied the legislature for an allocation of cap and trade funding to build affordable homes near transit hubs. And all 3 of those we had success with. Prop 57 was the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act, and it did 3 things. First, you'll read on the screen, but basically it lets children be children and judges be judges. It allows nonviolent offenders to apply for parole after they've served their primary sentence, and so it sort of takes away some of the enhancements. The third thing it does, it provides incentives and credits for incarcerated people to complete rehabilitation programs. One of the key goals was to involve more lay leaders in the work of Reform California, particularly Tikkun Tikva. Previously, rabbis had led the charge, and the rabbis who were on the leadership team wanted to bring in more lay partners to participate in the core work. And so we had a statewide webinar to kick that off to lay people. There were lay point people at many congregations, and a menu of actions that lay people in each congregation could take on in terms of passing Proposition 57. Additionally, there were 6 Tisha B'Av ceremonies across the state. I really like that Reform Judaism has taken Tisha B'Av and turned it into a justice kind of a Justice Day. I really like that. On September 12th, many of us, you can see from the picture how many of us gathered in Sacramento for a statewide summit on Proposition 57. We met with PICO, a California coalition. Governor Brown addressed the summit, and he said point blank that it would be through the power of faith communities that that criminal justice reform would pass in the state. And he was sort of handing the baton to us who had gathered to carry this out. Let's see, oh, you've got more pictures. We all through up and down the state, rabbis gave sermons at the High Holy Days. There were teaching events. There were Shabbat sermons, phone banking, presentations, just a whole bunch of interesting kinds of educational and action events. And about 24 congregations participated in Tikkun Tikva educational events. We also participated in voter canvassing and phone banking. And at least 17 congregations in California did this. We understood that Prop 57 was only going to pass if people of color turned out to vote in favor of it. So we partnered with congregations of neighboring congregations, Christian congregations in phone banking and canvassing, and that was greatly successful and very powerful for people who did it. So in all, there were approximately 40 congregations that participated in Tikkun Tikva, and we estimate about 9,000 Reformed Jews. And additionally, there was a significantly larger participation by Northern California congregations than we had in previous years. So up and down the state, we had a lot of participation. And finally, Proposition 57 passed decisively. We only needed to pass it by a simple majority, but it passed with 64.5% of the vote.
Thank you, Lori. Barb?
Great, thanks, Lee, and greetings everyone from Washington, D.C. The future looks lovely, 3 hours ahead. A little chilly and dark, but otherwise great. I wanted to share with you a little bit about what the national picture looks like and the unique role that California is going to play now more than ever in moving forward. So on your screen, you see a quick breakdown of what the 115th Congress is going to look like. We all know the results of the presidential election. So, but here's what the breakdown in Congress is going to look like. There will be Republican majorities in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. What that really means is that for the progressive agenda that it brings us together, it's really going to be, in many cases, states that are on the front lines of the issues. We know right away one of the first issues that's going to come up when Congress convenes January 3rd is going to be an effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act, quickly followed by reform or repeal, we don't even know, some changes to Medicare, Medicaid, vital healthcare programs that millions of Americans rely on. And in addition to that, we know all the issues listed on the screen, immigration and climate and civil rights and refugees and all those other issues are on the table as well. And there is a huge role for states to play in addressing the things that are coming out of the Congress and leading the way as well. And California, probably more than most states, simply because California is the biggest delegation in Congress. There are 53 seats for California members in the House, 2 Senate seats, of course, and it makes it by far the biggest delegation in Congress. The next biggest is Texas, which has 36, so quite a gap there. And that provides a unique opportunity and a unique responsibility for the members of the California delegation to help shape the conversation going forward. So that's number one, what's going on in California what's going on in Congress as it relates to California. But the state as well, we know, is really a harbinger for what is going to happen nationally, right? As California goes, so goes the nation. California has 40 million people, most populous state in the nation, 6% of the state's population is undocumented. There's the largest Latino population in the country, the most racially diverse population in the country. California is the only state, fun fact, I learned this today, only state in the country to host both the summer and winter Olympic Games. So the issues of climate that are affecting all of us are affecting you even more powerfully as well. So in all of those ways, California has the opportunity to really shape the national conversation in how we address issues like immigration and climate and race. And what we know is that, for example, in 2002, when California was the first state to limit global warming pollution from cars, it set a standard that other states and even countries around the world have followed. There are today 10 other states that follow the example that California set. The Trust Act that we just heard about a moment ago shows that it's very possible to balance security issues and just immigration policies. So in so many ways, we're going to be looking to you for leadership, for partnership, to help shape the conversation that we care about so deeply as Reformed Jews, and the message both that we want to bring to Washington and that we want to bring to other states as we advance our agenda together. So we're looking forward to doing that work with you.
Thank you. For those who don't know Barb, that is Barb Weinstein, who is the Associate Director for the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. And now we turn to Rabbi Joel Simons, the West Coast Legislative Director for the Religious Action Center.
Thank you, Lee, and sorry everyone, my video is not working this evening. As Barbara mentioned, there's really a wonderful opportunity for all of us out here in California to really serve as a countermeasure to some of the proposals and initiatives that will be coming out of Washington, D.C. We see already from the Senate Pro Tem, Kevin DeLeon, and the Speaker of the Assembly, Anthony Rendon, they've really stood up for the citizens of California in these last few weeks and have really shown what they hope to do to counter a lot of these measures, to stand up for the vulnerable populations in our state and to stand up for the environment. They're able to do this for a number of reasons. One, I believe it's truly in their hearts. Two, they're backed by a supermajority in the Senate and the Assembly, which gives them an unbelievable amount of power on the state level to counter some of these measures. When they opened up the 2017-2018 session last week with the swearing in of the new members of the Senate and the Assembly, they use it really as an opportunity to reiterate a number of their statements about protecting our vulnerable population. They also use it as an opportunity to unveil a number of the proposed bills and pieces of legislation that we're going to see coming up in the next few weeks and months. They also used it as an opportunity to introduce the urgency clause. This is rarely used because it takes a 2/3 majority to pass, but with the 2/3 majority passage of a bill under the urgency clause, it allows the bill to take effect the moment the governor signs it. And as we know, Governor Brown has said that he is cautious, but he's definitely here to support our citizens. That has not stopped members of the Senate and members of the Assembly in the state of California from using this urgency clause for a few bills really aimed at protecting the immigrant community. And we're going to send out information on this in the weeks to come, but just real quickly, one bill, SB 6, which has this urgency clause, is really there to establish a legal aid fund for people facing deportation. Another bill in the Assembly, AB 3, would set up training centers to educate legal workers on immigration law. So we're already seeing a number of bills being proposed that are, in a sense, preparing for a fight. Something else that we've seen come out of the Senate as well, in a sense, is a Fight for California package. And a few of the proposed legislation would be demanding a mandate of the vote by the people to approve any border wall project that would be set up in California, which would harm wildlife, harm the economy. So there's a number of So there's a number of bills that are being set up there not only to protect our environment, but to counter this border wall project. There's another bill that is being introduced, which would prohibit state agencies from providing information to the federal government on any person's religious affiliation. So again, we have an opportunity to really link ourselves with the leaders of California and their legislative agenda to really lead the country and fight for so many of these rights. So we're going to see these bills that are set up to protect the immigrant population, to protect our Muslim brothers and sisters, to protect the economy, to protect the environment, and a number of bills that are being proposed regarding healthcare as well. So this is the place to be if you're ready to roll up your sleeves and engage your congregation with your local and state elected officials to begin the fight. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now we move on to Rabbi Jessica Kirschner, who is, I'm going to get your title wrong. I'm sorry, Jessica.
Let me just do it. Don't worry about it. I'm the California Director for Leadership and Congregations, but really I'm part of the team here on the West Coast that is helping the RAC live into its new vision for having impact on a state level and having deep meaning in our congregations. It's also really my pleasure to be able to situate us in a moment of Torah. We are at Parshat Vayishlach, which is part of the narrative of Jacob and Esau. And it's an interesting portion, but it's one that we kind of skip sometimes on our way between more famous and frankly happier stories. This is a Torah portion that is full of a fair amount of violence and fear. It includes the dream where Jacob wrestles with an angel. It's the part we probably remember best. But it also includes the rape of Dinah. And the beginning of the portion is all about Jacob's anticipation of meeting his brother Esau again for the first time after many years before having stolen his birthright and then run away. So this is in the Torah a treacherous time, and Jacob is meant to navigate it. And it strikes me that we may be in a similar position. I'm also aware that in this Torah portion, part of what's remarkable is that Jacob has a strategy. He puts together a plan for how he's going to approach all of the challenges that are in front of him. I also love the fact that Jacob faces these challenges. While there is an enormous amount of fear and he acknowledges it, he really moves with courage into the future, knowing what's possible, knowing that there is danger, but not being daunted and not stopping his momentum and continuing to move forward. And then finally, I'm struck that he prepares his household to encounter Esau, and he girds them to expect 3 questions that may come from Esau and his men. And I think these questions might actually be important grounding questions for us as we look at our work going forward. He says, be prepared to answer the following. To whom do you belong? Where are you going? And who are these people ahead of you? I think what Jacob is really asking is, where do you come from? What's your history? Who are you as a people and how are you grounded? And who are you in a relationship with? Then he's asking, what's next for you? How do you see the lay of the land? And what are you aiming for? And then finally, what is it that is in front of you? What are the obstacles that face you? And what are your tactics and strategies to face your fears and the obstacles in order to move with courage into the future? And I think these are all questions that we are going to need to be able to answer in this moment. What we're hoping to do for the rest of the webinar is begin to talk about some of our vision for how we're going to approach this as Reformed Jews in California. But first, it's worth knowing where we are. Everyone, I think, is aware of the climate of hatred and bigotry that has been unleashed by the most recent presidential election. We have seen appalling rises in hate crimes and speech and real threats of attack against vulnerable populations. Muslims, immigrants, low-income people, African Americans, LGBT people, women, Jews, and others. I think it's worth our remembering as we think about this list of people that we're on the list, but we're not necessarily first in line. And if we can do as much as we can to connect our own fears about our own security with populations who are really deeply vulnerable in entirely new and maybe more frightening ways, to figure out how we really can all be stronger together. We're also aware that California is a key state. key for a number of reasons. All of the political reasons that Barb and Joel outlined for us, but also because we may be key in the strategy of the reform movement because we are rooted here with a real track record of social justice work at the local and state level. Through the work of Reform California, through our partnership with other broad-based organizations, and most especially through the individual work that congregations have been doing for years to build relationships with local communities of faith, to get to know your elected officials, and to make commitments and have victories around social justice achievements in your communities. We also know our state leaders and our key mayors have already expressed their eagerness to stand up to attacks on vulnerable populations. So there's at least one set of hurdles we don't have to face. They already know the problem. We just have to help support them and keep them focused to attack the things that we think are most important. And third, that there's really an opportunity here to pass far-reaching and proactive legislation in California that can be sort of a shining light, an alternative to the politics of hatred and bigotry that we're seeing in so many other places. We also know that we don't know where attacks may come from. If we wait until we know, then it's going to be too late. We need to get prepared ahead of time. We need to be in relationship across lines of difference. We need to have emergency plans in place. We need to have basically all done safety drills so that we know how to respond when attacks come and that we know how to show up for each other. Also, we want to participate with the reform movement in congregations and with other communities. In our movement, that means NIFTY, that means HUC, potentially that means our college groups, that we don't participate as isolated individuals. That's not really our theory of change. We think that change happens in the world, or one of the ways change happens and the way that we help make change happen is by moving communities of people. And so we need to do everything we can to build our capacity to move our congregations and our communities forward in action together. So how do you do this, you ask? One, we need to respond by protecting vulnerable populations from attacks from the federal government and from individuals who feel emboldened by this increased climate of hate. In order to pass what we hope will be groundbreaking new state and local model policies on the issues that we care about deeply, on LGBT protection, immigrant rights, healthcare, the environment, criminal justice reform, and religious freedom, all of these to embody our Jewish values, to live them out in the public sphere, and to keep our democracy accountable to those values. We also want to develop rapid response teams at least 40 California Reform congregations and communities. These are groups that will be able to mobilize their members to be in relationship, to act locally as part of a statewide and national effort. Sometimes this will mean congregations create new teams of people. You haven't yet put these folks together. Sometimes it means you already have a group in place and you're going to expand their mission into relationship building across lines of difference, training around response to emergency issues, and then potentially putting together dialogue groups and the opportunity to act and see if we have sort of shared agendas we want to move forward in our local communities. We also want to support congregations to create a culture of civic dialogue and discussion within our movement, where everyone, no matter their political party or perspective, feels valued and heard. One of the things that we obviously learned from this last election is the real breakdown of this kind of civic skill in our society, and we're convinced that if there is anywhere in our country where people should be able to speak to each other from a place of love and respect, even if they disagree and come to radically different conclusions, that ought to be our congregations. And if we've lost that skill, then we need to relearn it. And if it's weak, we need to strengthen it. And if we need to be a beacon of light to the rest of the country and our broader communities by doing this kind of work, then we need to be the ones to do it. That this really is a moment to step up on all kinds of levels and step up our ability to listen as well. And lastly, we want to be the California branch of the National Religious Action Center and Reform Movement campaign. So everything that we are doing here in California in many ways nests within the broader national work. We'll try as much as possible to use the same language, but we also know that we have special skills in California and a track record of congregations who are already experienced in doing this work. So there are going to be places where we can potentially push even a little bit further ahead. And that's good. It means that we can do this really important thing, which is provide hope and cover to other parts of our movement who may not be quite as ready as we are to go out as far, but if we are able to go farther, they will be able to come along behind us, and we together will then move so much further than we could alone. Lee, I think you were going to take us through the next section.
Yes. Oops. Hi, so I'm Lee Winkleman, the California Organizing Director and part of the California Rec team. So what is our strategy moving forward in light of everything Jessica just told us? Well, we want to provide congregations and communities support so that they can do actions that are appropriate for their culture, their local opportunities that are available. And the idea is that we recognize that congregations across our state are all different, and other Reformed communities that are not congregations are also different. So everybody isn't going to want to do the same thing. It's not going to make sense. So we want to provide a menu of actions, a whole series of possibilities, so that each congregation or community can choose the one that makes most sense for them. We know at this moment, we don't know what those actions will be, right? We're waiting to see what the opportunities are. The new administration has not, they have a lot of proposals, but they have not made any plans yet. They haven't really started their work. And we don't know what will emerge. So what we want to do is be prepared. And as the opportunities arise, as the attacks come up, we will be helping to provide you with a menu of actions so that you can take actions that are appropriate, and you can look at your local opportunities that you will discover as well. We want to provide regular webinars where we can come together and get an update on what's happening, do some training, and where we can share some of the successes that are going on around the state so we can all hear what everyone else is doing. We want to create an online discussion space where people can again come together to share what they're doing, ask each other questions, give each other advice. As much communication about what's working as we're all doing slightly different things in our local communities. If we share that, it will make us all feel much stronger, and we will be able to learn from each other. And lastly, we'll be sending regular email updates, which will also include information on what the latest opportunities and attacks and challenges are, and some things that you can do. So what kind of actions will our community undertake? We again, don't know exactly what these actions will be, because we don't yet know what kind of attacks are coming and what kind of opportunities there are to pass proactive legislation. We are engaging in research. We are keeping an eyes out. We have our office in Washington, and we are very connected here in our state. So we will know as stuff emerges. And again, not everyone will be doing the same thing, so you'll be able to choose which things are appropriate for your congregation or community. But here are some examples of some things that we might do. Interfaith prayer and study sessions with mosques or Latino churches or African American churches or other groups across lines of race, class, and difference. That builds relationships and prepares us so that we can act together when the moment arises. Congregations may take on a sanctuary role, taking in immigrants that are facing deportation, or otherwise supporting them as they face deportation. We will certainly be engaging our state legislators when there are opportunities to pass positive legislation that embodies our Jewish values. We may get together and talk about synagogue security if anti-Semitic attacks are on the rise in California. And we will be doing public statements. We've already had, as you will hear in a moment, several, there was a hate letter that went out to several mosques, and several of our congregations made public statements opposing that kind of hate letters. So the key steps on moving forward so that we can all be ready when the attacks come is to get together a little team of people in your congregation. 3 people, if you have clergy, a clergy person and 2 lay leaders who will agree to lead the effort in your congregation. And we have a Brit Olam, which is a covenant. It's the world we want covenant. And what this Brit Olam says is, we will work in our congregation to do all the things that Jessica and I have been talking about today, to fight off attacks against vulnerable populations, to counter the climate of hatred and the rise in bigotry, and to push forward on opportunities to advance our Reform Jewish values in the public sphere, to pass positive legislation that can be a model to the whole country. So I urge you, when this call is done, to go to rac.org/reform-California. You can take a look at the Brit Olam. You could print it, download it, or whatever. And then you could talk about who in your congregation should be the 3 people to sign this. Are you going to form a new team? Are you going to use an existing team, existing social justice team that will take on this role of being the rapid response when there is a crisis or an opportunity we need to respond to? And then once you figure out who your team is and sign the Brit Olam, the next action is to talk to members of your community, of your congregation or community, because that's how we really bring people together. We bring people together by sharing our fears and our hopes and talking about what we can do together. So you want to start having those conversations in your community. Programs where you do education and you have a speaker who presents are good, but they're not the same thing as having conversation where people can kind of connect together. And then another thing to do is to start building relationships across lines of race, class, and faith, with perhaps mosques or churches of color or other people appropriate in your community. If you don't have those relationships, start by calling up one person. Call up a imam or pastor or priest, or call up a lay leader and do a one-on-one conversation. If you do have some relationships, this is a good time to schedule some common activity, if it's prayer or study or just getting together for conversation. That's building the relationship so that when there's time for action, you're able to move forward. And then look around for opportunities that you have for you to act. Okay. So that is the basic outline of what we're going to do. It is get ready to act when the attacks come and when the opportunities come. Sign the Brit Olam, form a team in your congregation, and keep talking. We're going to move on now to the next part of the agenda. And this is what your congregations can do. And we're going to give you 2 examples of some work that congregations around the state have done that can be models for what we might do. And so I think we will jump into that. And our first speaker on this card is Rabbi Jonathan Kupitz from Temple Beth Israel in Pomona. Jonathan, are you there?
I am. I was just unmuting. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. So recently, one of the mosques in our area was one of the mosques that received that hateful letter that went out to a number of mosques in California and in Georgia and other places around the country that actually, was addressed to the children of Satan and said that they would do to the Muslims what the Nazis did to the Jews. And we were able to respond pretty rapidly, both through our board of trustees and through a public statement. And Lee reached out to me as well at that time, and we coordinated actually and included the RAC statement in what we put out. But really, we were able to do that because we've had a relationship now for over 9 years with the mosque there, and actually with some other mosques as well. There happen to be 2 mosques. There's a mosque across the street from the mosque that got the letter as well. One's Shiite, one's Sunni. The mosque I go to and the mosque I wouldn't go to in that sense. And we have relationships with both of them. And a number of things that we do every year that bring us together, not just us as the Muslim community and the Jewish community, but really a pretty broad tapestry of the interfaith community in the Claremont, Pomona area. So 8 years ago, we began an annual walk for peace. And this year, it started at the 2 mosques. We went from one mosque to the other, and somebody speaks for a few minutes at each place. And then then it went to a church, and then it came to Temple Beth Israel, where we fed the 300 people who participated in the walk. And every year, the mosque fed them for many years. We've moved it around where we end, then share a meal. And we hand out, people come in, and like if I'm Jewish, I get a handful of the beginning of the walk of blue beads. We have different colors for different traditions. And part of what we try to do is you want to end up with beads of all different colors. So we ask people to trade beads with each other as they walk, as a way to try to get people of different faith traditions to interact and have conversation with each other. And so this year's walk was Bridges, Not Walls, the stories that connect us. So that was part of it. And we've had, last April, we had our 6th annual Interfaith Seder as well, which has been hosted in the Islamic Center of Claremont. So while we have created an interfaith Haggadah, and pretty much Cantor Bush, my co-clergy, and me lead the Seder, it's been hosted in the mosque for the last number of years. And those are the ways that we have built things. And over the years, because of these relationships, other mosques have come to us and wanted to build relationships as well. I think they're very much in the Muslim community in a mode of that Jews were in maybe in the 50s or at other times, that it's important for us to have relationships with people of other faith communities so that when times are difficult, we have friends, we have relationships, that there's a sense that from their own community relation standpoint, they even though sometimes they feel, many are immigrants and they don't feel so comfortable interacting, they feel like outsiders, they've pushed themselves much more in recent years to do that. So we've been able to react. We sent a statement. We worked with the University of Laverne on a vigil. We did a number of different things. And but I think more importantly, it's about building our long-term relationship with other members in our interfaith community so that we can all stand together. It wasn't just us standing with the mosque. It was really the larger interfaith community that's built very strong bonds in the last 10 years, and we're able to stand together.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi Kupitz. Do you have any advice for someone who is just starting out wanting to make a relationship with a mosque, where they should start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question would be that the challenge sometimes with mosques is that many of them don't have professional leadership. So we tend to think when we work with churches, like, I'll reach out to the pastor or whoever that is. So I think often it's about trying to figure out, it's a little more complicated, but who are those people within the mosque who serve as sort of spokespeople. In none of these mosques are the imams the people that we have our relationships with. It's the president or the vice president or somebody who's involved with the committee. So I think it's about trying to identify those people. And sometimes it's about just going in and having a conversation and beginning that. I think that's the hardest piece. Often it's going to be the person who speaks the best English, depending on the nature of the mosque. If it's a mosque, like both of these are mostly immigrants, both the ones closest to us. So the people who they tend to want to send out in the community are the people who they feel put out the most modern vibe, right? That speak English well and are Americanized. And then after that, you kind of break down some of those self-conscious boundaries and are able to get a little bit more close. We also had our sisterhood invited the women from the mosque, and they did a whole thing where they came together and they shared each other's food. They talked about what they were making and doing, and they came together and they had an event together too. So there are ways that we can try to break some of those boundaries down.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to Rahel Smith, who is a lay leader at Congregation Bethel in Berkeley. Rahel?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. That was so wonderful to hear what's going on in Pomona, and it's a good reminder that there's a long-term project. It doesn't just happen immediately, and that the work that you've done one year can pay off 5 years later. That's very inspiring to hear about. At Bethel, we're in Berkeley. So as you might imagine, we have a lot of people in our congregation who are personally, professionally, extracurricularly committed to a progressive agenda and to activism. The challenge here has been that we've been working on intentionally for the past year or so is how do we make what we're trying to move towards is a kind of intentional congregational commitment and identity that really brings out those values that we all have and kind of puts those at the center. So to get that going, we've pulled together a social justice leadership team that's had a really interesting cross-section of people. It's people who have been involved in the congregation for a long time and kind of led social action work years ago. It's there's a teen on the committee. There are a number of newer members as well. So there's a cross-section that's part of the social justice leadership team. And our work has been to think about how do we shift the culture so that social justice is really at the center of our community and our identity, because as I said, a lot of people do that work and are members of Bethel, but they don't think of Bethel as the center for that work. And so we'd like to shift that. And we have very strong leadership, very strong backing from all of our rabbis, and we are blessed to have more than one clergy person here, and leadership and kind of spearheading from one rabbi, and many of us are delighted to be backing her leadership. So there's a lot of collaboration there. Some of the other things we've been doing in the past year and recent months included the Tikkun Tikva work. So there was Sacramento lobbying that some of us participated in. The first time I was ever went and spoke with a congressperson, it was really powerful to with some of my congregants to sit there and say, like, we are here as Jews to say that we care about sentencing reform. So to kind of put that out there and to identify ourselves as Jewish and caring about these progressive values. We also were one of the congregations that participated in the Yom Kippur, in the Tisha B'Av event, and kind of the focus of criminal justice reform that happened in California. And on Yom Kippur afternoon, we had a speaker who had been involved for many years in sentencing reform efforts, and so he spoke, and we had a discussion around that. And so Tikkun Tikva and that California campaign happened quite actively here. We also did canvassing as part of the campaign. So that included individuals and families and multiple people going and doing canvassing in Oakland, partnering with a group called Oakland Rising. So it wasn't just us or just Bethel. We were thinking about building coalitions. And after the election, the Wednesday, a week and a day after the election, there was the rabbis and leaders pulled together. There was so much desire to do something that they pulled together a kind of impromptu, unplanned, but planned within the last few days event to just come together and think about what are people interested? What do we want to work on? What are you moved to talk more about? And we had 150 people attend that unplanned event. People really came together and split up into multiple groups to focus on, like, one group thought about immigration work and supporting immigrants. And now I hear that they are paired with a family, and there's a group that's a guardian circle for an immigrant family in Berkeley. So that's moving forward. And there's a green team that's been working for many months and is coming together with, like, additional support. There's a lot of interfaith outreach work that's been done. So we've gone from, like, we had the leadership team, we have Tikkun Tikva, which is a specific campaign that lots of people could get involved with. There's the canvassing, and then post-election we had 150 people. So it's really been interesting that we've had this kind of not super public leadership team that's just been thinking about how do we do culture change. And then with the election and people's awareness of how important action is, there's suddenly this overwhelming desire for more people to get involved. And we've now laid the groundwork of it's not just a one-time thing, but we're thinking about how to bring that and make it a multi-year project. So that's some of what's been going on here in Bethel, Berkeley.
Thank you so much, Rahel. So now we get to, now I'm going to turn over to you, Rabbi Kirschner.
I can just find my mute button. So the limitation of webinars is that it winds up being a small number of people in little squares at the top talking, and a lot of people in all kinds of other settings listening. So we're hoping in the next 10 minutes or so to take time for your questions, which can certainly be for the panelists, or if that's better handled somewhere else, we'll figure out where to send it. There is a function at the bottom of your screen. If you sort of scroll down towards the bottom that says Q&A, you can click on that box and then type in questions. Or if that doesn't work for you, you can write them in the chat function. That's probably the easiest way to share what you're thinking. So if anyone has a question, go ahead and start typing that. In the meantime, and to give everyone a little bit of cover, one question that we thought might come up, and so I will send this to Lee, and then maybe Barb can back him up, is how is the work that we're doing here in California connected to the larger reform movement national campaigns?
Great. So the reform movement is engaged in a very similar national campaign as we have been talking about today. And in fact, we are the California branch of the national campaign. So the great thing about this is we will have a lot of information from Barb and the staff about what is going on in Washington and what we in California can do. And because California has a somewhat stronger history of, we've worked together on these 4 statewide campaigns, we've done a lot of local work together, we've done a lot of justice work, we're in a little bit better position to move. So we're able to try out some kinds of responses and organizing that will inform the whole national campaign. So there will be national webinars, and we will probably be participating in those, and there may be some webinars that are more appropriate just for California. And we will be sort of feeling this out a little bit as we go. But the great thing is that we will all be part of this national effort. I don't know if you want to add anything, Barb?
I agree with everything you said, Lee, and I'll just add that someone posted the question related, which is, are we going to be doing anything around voting rights? And this is very much at the top of our agenda, part of our ongoing racial justice campaign. If there's one thing that we learned from this election, it's that making sure that every eligible voter has the ability to cast their vote and to register to vote is essential. The voter turnout this time around, this election, was 56%. More than 90 million eligible voters did not go to the polls on election day. And we see in state after state what a difference it makes when people show up or don't show up at polls, or when they show up and are not allowed to freely cast their ballot. So we launched the Tikkun Tikva campaign in California, the Nitzavim campaign nationwide just a couple of months before Election Day, but this is now an ongoing part of our work, and there's a lot to be done between now and the next national election 2 years from now, and we're looking forward to doing that work together with you.
Thanks. So we have questions that have emerged in the Q&A section, so good to know that function works. Monica Steiner asks, at our synagogue, we're focused on not alienating people within our congregation, and yet we want to take on social action causes. Any advice? Lori, do you want to pick up that question, or did you just want to make sure we answered it live?
While Lori unmutes, let me just say that part of what we need to do is really create a culture of civic dialogue in our congregations so that everybody feels they can participate. We don't want to be partisan. This is a nonpartisan effort. We have people who voted for every candidate conceivable in our congregations. We have people with every political view conceivable in our congregations. And we don't want this just to be to just some people who are like progressive or on the left or define themselves in a certain way. These are about essential Jewish values, about opposing bigotry, about the dignity of every individual. And these are things that there's a lot of agreement on. no matter who people voted for. We need to ground our work in those values and make sure we make room for everyone to be heard and respected and feel that they're a part of the community, no matter what party they belong to and no matter what their views are.
Lori, did you want to add to that?
No, I'm sorry, forgot to unmute myself. I just wanted to, I thought that was a very important question. I wanted to be sure that that was answered live.
Great, absolutely. I would just add to that answer. I agree with everything Lee said. And I would add that we are on our strongest ground as Jews when we talk about the issues that we care about in the public sphere from a place of Jewish values. When, as much as possible, we depoliticize it. It is not about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the Green Party and which issues fall on which group's agenda. It's about what issues are within the Jewish agenda. And the more our congregations can do to be talking intentionally and frequently and deeply about the Jewish values that link us to each other and to our tradition, the easier it will be to have conversations about how we live out those values in our sort of public decisions. But making sure that that's part of the language of your congregation is really important. And then practicing those civic dialogue conversations within the synagogue, even when it's scary, not retreating to that feeling of it'd be better if we just don't talk about the stuff that's hard for us. Ultimately, silence breeds silence. And that's really the opposite of what we want to be doing. So we are also looking for resources to share with congregations about how to foster those civic conversations within your own settings, and then where it's possible between folks in your congregation and folks outside your congregation. Barb, you unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'll just add, we created a website called rac.org/urgency of now that has a wealth of resources that speak to this moment, including a guide called Speaking Truth to Power, a guide for synagogues taking public policy positions. And it directly provides a way to engage around social justice, public policy issues, hopefully bringing the congregation together rather than sowing division. So I really commend it to everyone on this webinar. It's a great resource.
Okay, now there are so many questions. This is going to be a little bit challenging. So let's, Barb, can you pick up the question about how the movement is engaged with or supporting the Women's March events in DC or state-related marches? I know it's a tricky one, but I think lots of people have it.
Yes, just had to unmute myself there. Sure. So many of you know there is a march that's being planned for January 21st. It's the Saturday right after the January 20th inauguration. It's called, among other things, the Women's March in DC. There has not been a lot of information that has come out from the organizers of the march. The last few days, they firmed up a few details, like the location, which is going to be on the National Mall, the timing, which is a 10 a.m. Start, and a mission statement, which you can read on the march's website. The plan right now, and it's still very much evolving as the march organizers' plans evolve as well, is that several Reform congregations in the DC area are going to be coming together to do some sort of service on that Shabbat. Location and timing to be announced still, and we're going to be plugging into that. So we'll have information to share as soon as they make their decisions, and we will be happy to. We'll have a little bit more to share about what we're going to be doing on the day of as well, probably within the next 24 to 48 hours. But all of this is very much an evolving process. Usually these kind of marches take a year plus to plan, and they're pulling this off in just 2.5 months. So kudos to them, and we're getting the information out as rapidly as we receive it.
There's also a march in Los Angeles on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is the same thing. It's by a small group of people who are organizing it, and the details are slow to emerge. There are some congregations that are interested in participating. It's not clear yet whether we will formally endorse it, but we will make available what information we have. And Temple Emmanuel of Beverly Hills is doing an event on the Tuesday before that Sunday. I don't have the date off the top of my head. that will be an informational event. Some speakers from from ACLU and other groups speaking about some of the issues, and they've invited other Reform congregations to join them on that day. So we can get out some information about that too.
There are a number of people who've asked questions about specific issues: election reform, healthcare protections or expanding healthcare coverage, and also protection of immigrants and immigrant rights. Barb and Joel, if you can look at those 3 questions from Martin, Rosen, and Susan, and see if we have lightning fast answers. I would just add on the DACA question, at least a piece of that is congregations can explore whether they want to be part of the sanctuary movement. I think we're also looking into what we might be able to do with that as the Reform movement, but are not in a position yet to make any commitments about that. But there are things the movement can do, and then there are things that individual synagogues can do. And if that issue speaks to your congregation, it is definitely one worth pursuing. Barb or Joel, can you add anything on any of the issues they mentioned, or a time frame by which we think we might be looking at when issues will emerge?
And we have only 30 seconds till we have to move on, unfortunately.
Luckily, we have a full staff in California, and we are looking into all those issues and serving on coalitions regarding those issues.
On Affordable Care Act, we know it's going to be one of the first things that comes up in Congress when they return January 3rd. The question specifically asked about single-payer healthcare, which we as a Reform movement have a long time supported. So if that was an option, we'd love to see that and advocate for that. Election reform, lots of options on the table, including nonpartisan districting commissions and other steps as well. And the question about DACA, I encourage you to go to rac.org/urgency of now. There's an action alert you can send to the White House to encourage them to protect the DACA, the Dreamer kids who are at risk with the new administration's proposals made during the campaign.
So unfortunately, we don't have time to get to every question, but the great thing is that we have the Reform CA Facebook page. And if you go there, this can be a source where people can ask questions. We can get the answers in real time. So if you're not signed up for the Reform CA Facebook page, I urge you to do that. Be careful you don't actually accidentally sign up for the Reform California Facebook page, which is a marijuana rights organization. You want to be with the Reform Jewish group, Reform CA on Facebook.
I mean, we don't judge. You could be in both places, but we will be with you in Reform CA. So just as a closing, a couple of things that you can do right now. You can go to rac.org/reformca and review the Brit Olam and have a conversation among your congregational leaders about whether this is something that you can sign on to. You can identify a team of ideally clergy and lay leaders to be the people taking responsibility for communicating back and forth between the congregation and Reform California and our RAC West staff. As this campaign rolls out, you can start talking to people in your congregation or community about the need to respond rapidly to attacks and opportunities. This is one-on-one conversations, house meetings, before and after services. Wherever you see people, we can be talking about this. Our conversations build bonds that get us beyond politics and into our values out in the world. And you can reach out to local mosques, churches, and organizations of color and within the LGBT community. If you don't have those relationships, Lee outlined a couple of ways that you can start to form them. And we, the staff, Lee, Joel, and myself here in California, we are all here to help you. Also, you can send a delegation that is 3 or more people to the Consultation on Conscience, our Reform Movement's biennial conference in Washington, D.C., April 30th to May 2nd. You can register for that on the RAC website. This will be a pretty incredible opportunity both to see our power in action in DC. Really, it'll be just about 100 days into the new administration. Also do work and training so that your community you can learn things in DC and take them home and be better prepared to do the next phase of your work. I wanted to leave us just with sort of one, I think, inspiring and galvanizing and also challenging piece of text. This is from a writer named Victoria Safford, who reminds us that our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, nor the stalwart, boring gates of common sense, nor the strident gates of self-righteousness which creak on shrill and angry hinges. People cannot hear us there, and they cannot pass through. Nor the cheerful, flimsy gate of everything is going to be all right, but a different, sometimes lonely place, the place of truth-telling about your own soul first of all and its condition, the place of resistance and defiance, the piece of ground from which you see the world both as it is and as it could be, and as it will be, the place from which you glimpse not only the struggle, but joy in the struggle. And we stand there beckoning and calling, telling people what we are seeing, asking people what they see. I think this and the work that's connected to it is our work, and it is really a pleasure and a joy and a deep blessing to be engaged in that work with you. So thank you so much for being part of this statewide webinar. We are looking forward to connecting with you and your congregations and communities in coming days, and then opening the conversation about where we go from here, stronger, always together. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.